This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. When you hear John Belushi singing She Caught the Katy from the Blues Brothers, you might be correctly thinking I'm going to talk about John Belushi today. And I am. I love the guy. I loved his comedy. A fabulous singer. But I think you might be surprised at where I go today and the lesson that we can all take away when it comes to the news. Because the news ain't always factual, ain't always the truth. Or you could say it is always factual and it is always the truth. But have you ever thought about that you could have facts and truth and they can be positioned in such a way to literally not tell the truth? Oh yes, this is very common with our literary minds that come from the Ivy Leagues. Most of us don't think about these kinds of things unless we're exposed to it, unless it happens to us. Then we go, aha, now I know how the sausage is made. Now I know how the game is played. You like to think there is honor out there. But ladies and gentlemen, let me put that to rest. Let me put that thought to rest. Honor in news media? Give me a fucking break. And by the time this episode is finished, I suspect whether or not you use media, news media, for investing decisions or political decisions, you might just say to yourself, I shouldn't use it for literally anything. Before I jump back into connecting John Belushi into this little narrative that I'm posing today, let me give an example, my personal example. The very first time that I dealt with a reporter that mischaracterized me, misquoted me, whatever you want to call it, but basically created fiction out of my words, out of my interview, I was 21 years of age. Boy, that's a really great lesson to learn at a young age. How many people get a chance to watch a reporter dishonestly make their sausage? I looked her up recently to see where she had navigated her career these decades later. She's at Bloomberg now, moved on up the ladder. But to think back to all those years ago, her training ground at a local paper, and the manipulation. Now, I'm not going to go into the exact mischaracterization that she employed upon me, but it was a light bulb moment. I woke up and I said, do not trust a reporter, the news media, etc., ever. And for any of you out there that have watched politics in America for the last couple of years, if you are ever charged with anything in America, get your damn attorney in the room, period. A little unsolicited advice. Not that I've had to use it, but I know exactly how the game works. With that set up, let me bring Mr. John Belushi back into the conversation. For those of you that don't know, he was one of the best comedic actors ever. Animal House, the Blues Brothers, some of his SNL skits like Little Chocolate Donuts, which you can find on YouTube. Just brilliant. The guy died at 33 of a drug overdose, but he had a quality to his comedy where you would have thought he was 53. He seemed older for some reason, more experienced. He just had an edge. But by the time he died, I think a cocaine heroin overdose, it was not pretty. The life got to him. So he did all this fabulous work, and he burned out fast. We're left decades later with that comedy gold, though. We're fortunate. Because it's not like Charlie Chaplin, where you look at that stuff from the 1930s, black and white, stilted, odd video. Belushi's timeless. I mean, if you can't watch Animal House and the Blues Brothers today and laugh your rear end off, there's something wrong with you. He was the precursor to the Hangover movies. He was the precursor to a Will Ferrell. It starts with a guy like Belushi. Now, a couple of years after he died, his wife hired Bob Woodward to write the biography of John Belushi. Now, I remember back in the day, this title, Wired, I think it was the Fast Times of John Belushi, but I don't recall the details. Now, of course, Bob Woodward, my gosh, this is the guy that brought down Nixon. Now, when I think of Woodward, I do think of a fairly even-keeled guy. I tend to assume he is probably left-leaning, but Woodward, in all of his interviews, generally appears even-keeled to some degree. He seems grounded. He doesn't appear as an open partisan as many people do today. Now, some of you might come back to me and immediately say, well, Mike, here's all the evidence. He is an open partisan. Fair enough. You might be right. But let me contrast Bob Woodward to, for example, his partner, Carl Bernstein of Watergate fame. Carl Bernstein is 100% partisan. There is nothing objective about Carl Bernstein. He's partisan. Sean Hannity is partisan. There is nothing objective about Sean Hannity except he has a partisan view. Now, Bernstein and Hannity both believe they have the partisan truth. And perhaps one of them is right. Perhaps both of them are right. But I would just make the case that Woodward is a little different, a little less partisan. And this is important for the example of Belushi. Because, okay, the guy died. His wife goes to Woodward and says, hey, I'm a little leery about what happened with the investigation by the LAPD. Will you do an investigation? Will you write the biography? Will you dig into everything? Woodward takes on the challenge, his only non-political book, this biography of John Belushi. But almost immediately when the book came out, people were not happy. They said, hold on, this is just not right. The book was all about Belushi's drug use and just painted the picture of a very, very troubled guy on a lot of drugs. And that was it. A very sad, sad tale. But it was the nuance that Woodward employed in this book that's really interesting for all of us. I'm going to read a few examples where you can see how what might be considered truth actually isn't truth. Now, if you want to find the article that I'm pulling some of these insights from, you will find it quickly online. Tanner Colby, Tanner, Tanner Colby, Deconstructing Bob Woodward. Tanner Colby actually wrote the second bio on Belushi, and line by line went through Woodward's bio of Belushi and corrected it. Apparently, this has not been done before to come up with a more accurate representation of John Belushi. So here's a great example from Colby's article about how Woodward makes his sausage. Take the filming of the famous cafeteria scene from Animal House, which Belushi totally improvised on the set, no rehearsal. What you see in the film is the first and last time he performed that scene. Here's the story as recounted by Belushi's co-star, James Widows. One of the things that was so spectacular to watch during the filming was the incredible connection that Belushi and John Landis had. John Landis was the director of Animal House. During the scene on the cafeteria line, Landis was talking to Belushi all the way through it, and Belushi was just taking it one step further. What started out as Landis saying, "Okay, now grab the sandwich," became, in John's hands, taking the sandwich, squeezing it and bending it until it popped out of the cellophane, sucking it into his mouth, and then putting half the sandwich back. He would just go a little further each time. Co-star Tim Matheson remembered that John did the entire cafeteria line scene in one take. "I just stood by the camera mesmerized." Other witnesses agree. Every person who recounted that incident to me used it as an example of Belushi's virtuoso talent and his great relationship with his director. Landis could whisper suggestions to Belushi on the fly, and he would spin it into comedy gold. Now here's how Bob Woodward presented that exact real situation, the cafeteria scene at Animal House. Here's how Bob Woodward wrote about that particular scene. Landis quickly discovered that John could be lazy and undisciplined. They were rehearsing a cafeteria scene, a perfect vehicle to set up Belushi's insatiable cravings. Landis wanted John to walk down the cafeteria line and load his tray until it was a physical burden. As the camera started, Landis stood to one side shouting, "Take that, put that in your pocket, pile that on the tray, eat that now, right there." John followed each order, loading his pockets and tray, stuffing his mouth with a plate of Jell-O in one motion. Now that's Woodward's taking of the facts and spinning them into something else. Now remember here, we're not talking politics. We're not talking the markets. We're just talking about a damn biography about a famous comedian by one of the most famous and respected journalists ever. Tanner Colby goes on to explain about Woodward and his characterization of the scene. First off, Woodward wrongly calls the cafeteria scene a rehearsal, when half the point of the story is that Belushi pulled it off without ever rehearsing it once. Also, there's actually nothing in the anecdote to indicate laziness or lack of discipline on Belushi's part. Yet Woodward chooses to establish the scene using those words. The implication is that Belushi was so unfocused and unprepared that he couldn't make it through the scene without the director beside him telling him what to do, which is not what took place. When I interviewed him, Landis disputed that he ever referred to Belushi as lazy or undisciplined. Quote, "The greatest crime of that book," end quote, Landis says of Wired, "is that if you read it and you just assume that John was a pig and an asshole, and he was anything but. He could be abrupt and unpleasant, but most of the time he was totally charming and people adored him." Now Tanner Colby goes throughout his article, scene by scene, just correcting Woodward. What was Woodward's motivation? Well, he must have had some kind of motivation. And if you mischaracterize someone's career to that extent, you have to think that for whatever reason, Bob Woodward did not like John Belushi. So he picked, of the range of directions one could go, using what he thinks were facts, to create something that did not happen. This gets right back to my little example with the media when I was 21 years of age. This shit goes on all the time. Colby goes on to say, "Whenever people ask me about John Belushi and the subject of the book Wired by Bob Woodward comes up, I say it's like somebody wrote a biography of Michael Jordan in which all the stats and scores are correct, but you come away with the impression that Michael Jordan wasn't very good at playing basketball." I know it might be really weird to hear this, but there are people in this world, I call them weasels. These are the kinds of people that a guy like Nassim Taleb just drills on a nonstop basis. These weaselly motherfuckers that go through life, I don't know, jealous, hating, thinking they are superior when they're really not. Oh, sure, they might have the high IQ and they can pen the word to the paper and make it look good. But they're not honest. They're not real. They're something else. They're arrogant as shit. Colby concludes his article saying the simple truth of Wired is that Bob Woodward, deploying all of the talent and resources for which he is famous, produced something that is a failure as journalism. And when you imagine Woodward using the same approach to cover secret meetings and drone strikes and the budget sequester and other issues of vital national importance, well, you have to stop and shudder. Now, this piece with Bob Woodward and John Belushi, it was not written, as of right now, to support Trump. Whether you like Trump or whether you hate Trump, it was written in 2013. The people in the article that say Woodward got it wrong, Dan Aykroyd, Al Franken, former Senator Al Franken, these are not conservative names. These are people that support left positions. And there's nothing wrong with that ultimately. It used to be okay to support left positions or to support right positions. And people did not want to kill each other at all times. But I find this example, which I had not heard of before, I find this example with Woodward basically getting Belushi wrong. And we don't know why he chose to do it wrong. Did he not have enough information? Did he have an agenda? We don't know exactly. But we know it's wrong. And other people have proved that he's wrong. So where does that leave us today? When you see someone come on the tube, when you see someone release a book, if you don't have any data that really allows you to get to the granular level, how the hell do you know? How do you know? Maybe Bob Woodward would say the same thing. He based his work on data, but I based my trend following book on data. Same with my Turtle Trader book. For example, in my trend following book, I feature Bill Dunn and John Henry, two trend following traders. Bill Dunn has funded some of the Ayn Rand films. John Henry supports left-leaning candidates. They have very different politics. But when it comes to trend following, who gives a shit? Because the data of their work, the data of their trading actually showed them to be very similar. So even though they have chosen to have different perspectives on politics over the course of their life, I thought it was important to show that the data was the truth, to get to their essence. Now, you could make the argument that if the people on the set in that classic cafeteria scene with Belushi, if the people on the set all say that Woodward got it wrong, they were all there, and they're in unison saying Woodward got it wrong, they're like market data. And then Woodward is choosing to look at the market data and say it's something other than what the hell it is. Now here's the finer point of my little rant today. Woodward is the top of the heap. He's the golden boy. He's the guy that everyone respects. He is it. Now imagine all those other people out there, because he's obviously not the only journalist working. Imagine what the hell everyone else is doing in the news media. I mean, it's one big game of fiction. It's not real. It's fantasy. So unless you know at a granular level how something happens, it's very, very difficult to take the news seriously. What you need to navigate this world is an internal compass, internal principles that drive you, not noise that you hear that is 99% chance fiction driving you. I mean, take a step back, right? If the best damn journalist of the last 3 decades, for whatever reason, refused to write the truth about the famous cafeteria scene with Belushi and Animal House, if that guy refused to write that as truth, well, my God, none of it's believable. And if none of it's believable, how do you make your decisions? Well, guess what? You don't make life decisions. You don't make market decisions. You don't make political decisions based off reporting or journalism. The fourth estate in the United States of America is not such a great thing today, in my humble opinion. And I think anyone that comes out and defends the media unilaterally without digging deep, you know what you should probably do? You should probably find out, how do they get paid? Because anybody that defends the media out of hand, out of the gate, and just says something like, that guy Covel, he's picking on a one-off situation with Woodward, that's all bullshit. Those are the kinds of people that you got to run from. You got to run really fast because they absolutely don't want you to know the truth. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.